Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we are appreciative of you taking that time to speak with us. To listen to the podcast today. As always, if you found this information valuable and find it worth sharing, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast and turn on notifications. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. We put out a new episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we also put a video out on YouTube every Wednesday as well for those who like to watch the podcast. But in any event, we say welcome and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I'm just going to start out with this right now. So down. I'm going to open it up that way because today I want to talk about local officials, not even local officials. I want to talk about public corruption in the United States amongst local and federal officials. And I want to talk about this today because there was a recent ruling by the United States Supreme Court, which basically, in my opinion, has given local and state public election, or I should say state and local elected officials, to basically receive money for any transaction or deal that they're in without having any level of prosecution or the possibility of conviction being sought after in regards to them. So what am I talking about? The Supreme Court made a ruling on Title 18. And for those who may not know, the United States Code Title 18 basically addresses crimes and criminal procedure not specifically, but one part deals with crimes of public officials. And in this title, there are several sections, but one of the sections is Section 666 of Title 18, and I don't want to legalese us out, but in Title 18, Section 666, in that portion of the title, and I'm just pulling it up, it basically makes it a crime for state and local officials to corruptly accept items worth at least $5,000 with the intent to be influenced or rewarded for an official act. So that's what Title 18, Section 66A 1B says. It makes it a crime for state and local officials to corruptly accept items worth at least $5,000 with the intent to be influenced or rewarded for an official act. Again, why am I talking about this? Well, going back to the Supreme Court ruling, I should be in the mic. The Supreme Court ruling that just recently came down. In this Supreme Court ruling, it was a 6-3 decision, and I'm reading an article here from AP. It says the Supreme Court overturned the bribery conviction of a former Indiana mayor, and I'm going to talk about that on Wednesday in the latest series in a series of decisions narrowing the scope of federal public corruption law. The High Court's 6-3 opinion along ideological lines found The law criminalizes bribes given before an official act, not rewards handed out afterwards. And it's very important to emphasize that, because what this decision, just as it just said, but I'll repeat it, it basically is saying that if, let's say, the mayor of Indiana was told, hey, we'll give you $10,000 so you can make sure that we get awarded this contract, they're saying that's illegal. But in the case of this Indiana mayor, and I'm going to talk about this, he received money after the company won the contract. The company then gave the mayor money. And what the Supreme Court just ruled is that that's not illegal, because that's a form of gratuity, as they say, almost a tip. But what they're saying is that if it doesn't influence the rewarding of the contract, then it's not illegal. Matter of fact, let me get into the case that kind of led to this. So in Indiana, what happened here, and this was this was basically a deal for, I believe it was for trucks. Let me just pull it up here, because I want to make sure that I am super accurate, which is another thing, because somebody made a comment on one of my posts and they asked, where do I get this information from? I get this information directly from the source. I just want to, and I played this 1,000 times.
All I'm doing is presenting the facts.
Right. I'm just giving you the information from the source, right? So a lot of what I report on this podcast, I'm not just giving hyperbole or just talking from opinion. I'm giving you the information directly from the source. So I'm either pulling it from articles and then I'm sourcing those articles to find out where they got their information from, or like in this, I'll be talking directly from the source from, the U.S. Title 8, the U.S. title laws, and also from the Supreme Court ruling. But to kind of move the conversation forward. So this decision resulted from this case in Indiana. And I'm reading here from the St. Louis Public Radio, where they documented this case. In the case in Indiana that led to this recent Supreme Court decision, in 2021, there was a conviction of a Northwest Indiana mayor by the name of Mayor James Snyder. And in that case, what ended up happening was he received $13,000 from a company that had recently won contracts to sell garbage trucks to the city of former Portage, Portage. I believe I'm saying that city right, Portage, Indiana. Anyway, in that case, he received $13,000 after the contracts were awarded. And in this recent Supreme Court decision, they basically saying that's not a bribe. That is called gratuity. I mean, how are they going to even be able to prove this going forward is my concern, right? Because what's going to end up happening is that you're now going to have all of these elected officials receiving these gratuities, right? And what's going to end up happening is that they're going to receive this money and there's going to be nothing that the courts can do, because they're going to say, well, it wasn't a bribe. I didn't know they were going to win the contract, but I helped them. And the crazy thing about this case, and I was reading somewhere else about this case in Indiana, is that the mayor basically said that he received this $13,000 gratuity from the company that was selling the garbage trucks because he was acting as a consultant in the deal. So I'm like, well, how is the mayor acting as a consultant in a deal that's going to affect, the city? That whole thing has blown my mind. But in any event, going back, So this was a Supreme Court decision. Now, another reason why I want to highlight this is because, as many people may know, or you may not know, one of the Supreme Court judges that voted for this is Clarence Thomas, and Clarence Thomas was recently involved, or at least it was discussed, that he himself was being accused of receiving lavish gifts from, I don't know, you want to call them supporters, people that he's has relationships with, which well over $5,000. But I just found it to be ironic that he would be involved in that decision, of course, to go ahead and make this legal. So I started to look up, who are the judges that made this decision, right? Because I said, okay, well, let me find out who was involved in making this decision. And it just so happens that not only did Clarence Thomas make this decision, but obviously there were 5 other judges with him that were also involved in this decision making. And as I'm talking, I'm looking up the Clarence Thomas case, because not the case, but the accusations against Justice Clarence Thomas, because I wanted to see exactly what he has been accused of in terms of the gifts. It says, according to, and I'm reading here from, what I'm reading from, Alliance for Justice. It says, according to the new reporting, Justice Thomas only began receiving lavish gifts from wealthy conservatives after complaining in conservative circles that he was paid so poorly that he was considering quitting. Come on, man. Like, you can't make this up. Damn. So they started giving Judge Clarence Thomas gifts because he threatened that he was going to quit. Now, why would they start giving him gifts? Because they want rulings such as this to continue to go through, to ensure that, obviously that the money keeps flowing in. But kind of going back to the Supreme Court decision. So it was a 6-3 majority decision. So I wanted to find out who were the judges that made this crazy decision. So in the ruling, you had Justice Kavanaugh, who voted for this. You also had Justice Roberts, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, also Justice Barrett. They were the 6 that made that decision, and then Justice Jackson, also Justice Sotomayor, and also Justice Kagan were against it. Why am I going through this? I'm going through this because we obviously are in an election year, and as everyone knows who has listened to this program, if this is your first time listening, I don't care, red, blue, Republican, Democrat, donkey, elephant, whatever it is, okay? I'm not, party lines is not my thing. I'm a registered independent, have been, and I have voted Green Party. I voted independent. I voted Republican, Democrat. I vote for what is best in my interest, in the interest of the people, obviously, within my network. But why is voting so important? Voting is important because when you go through the list of these justices, what you will find is that Justice Roberts, appointed by George Bush, George W. Bush. This is George Bush II. Clarence Thomas, appointed by Judge Bush the first. Justice Alito, appointed by George W. Bush, George Bush II. Justice Sotomayor was appointed by Barack Obama. Justice Kagan was appointed by President Obama. Gorsuch was appointed by Donald Trump. Kavanaugh, appointed by Donald Trump. Barrett, appointed by Donald Trump. And then Ketanji Brown, who was recently appointed by Joe Biden. But this is why voting is important, because these type of decisions affect what will happen in the future based on who you put in office. Now, everybody knows I've been ringing the alarm about local elections. I'm big on local elections, right? Because I've said it a million times. Local elections will affect you immediately. I'm talking about the people that you put into office for your local elections. You'll see those decisions affect you more quicker than obviously once you get to the president and into your other elected officials at the state and federal government levels. But in this case, what you see here is a clear example of what happens when your vote for your president goes in. So, I know a lot of people are disenchanted based on this recent debate, and I was horrified as well in terms of this recent presidential debate between Donald Trump and Biden. But who you vote for affects what will happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So you always have to keep that in mind. In addition, why this is bad, in my opinion, is because it has already been reported that convictions and cases against local, state elected officials had been in decline in terms of corruption cases, had already been in decline. Matter of fact, ABC7 Chicago did a case on this. Did a report on this earlier this year talking about the decline. And they stated, a few reasons why this was happening. And also they were speaking to a professor of law, Stuart Green, professor of law of Rutgers Law School. And he also kind of explained why there had already been a decrease in the number of corruption cases against local and elected officials. So let me play that, and then we'll close out from there. So.
Tonight, an I-Team 20-year analysis of court data reveals what is being pursued. Immigration cases up 9%, violent crime cases up 15%, civil rights cases more than tripled. Corruption cases may be more complicated for prosecutors.
You're going against more sophisticated and possibly more deep-pocketed defendants. These are people who often hold public office, whether it's federal office or in the case of the Speaker of the Illinois House, these are public officials who have a lot of power, a lot of resources, and a lot of allies.
And so this was already an issue in terms of corruption cases that were in decline against local officials. Now with this ruling from the Supreme Court, this is only going to get worse, in my opinion. I'll close out with this case, or with this story. In Chicago, obviously, not in Chicago, but going back to Illinois, there was a case of a Secretary of State. He was a Secretary of State back in the 1960s. His name was Paul Powell. And Paul Powell was very well known within the state of Illinois. He died in 1970. Why am I telling this story? Well, in 1970, when he died from a heart attack. It was later found that he had almost $800,000 in cash in shoe boxes and briefcases hidden in a closet. This is important to note because, again, first of all, this was 1970, right? I'm talking about $800,000 in 1970. Secondly, he was only being paid $30,000 a year for the job that he was working. In his death, when he died in 1970, there was no notification, or it wasn't made public until 24 hours later, because the aides and his staff were removing documents and other incriminating papers from his office so there would be no paper trail of the corruption. This was in 1970. The reason I tell this story is because Paul Powell had a famous line that is often repeated. And that line is, there's only one thing worse than a defeated politician, and that's a broke one. And with this new law, or at least with this modification of the law based on this decision by the Supreme Court, I almost guarantee you're going to see more cases. You're going to see more corruption amongst local officials and elected officials and public officials, because they now know that they're going to be able to get around this requirement without any persecution at all.
Men lie, women lie, the numbers don't.
And I'm going to end it right there. So that is my time for today. As always, I hope you find this information to be valuable. If so, please feel free to leave a comment. You can reach me on any of the social media platforms, or you can reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram, and then also on YouTube. You can leave messages there as well, and I appreciate everyone who has done so. So closing out, as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.